Hello everyone, my name is Abraham Kasilante. I'm a certified personal trainer. Welcome back to Ultra Fit, where we learn the cool science of health and fitness. Let's get into it. So today we are looking at intermittent fasting, aka time restricted eating, or TRE in short. So intermittent fasting is where you cycle through eating and fasting, considering more when you eat, like the time you eat, rather than what you eat. So expect to learn what intermittent fasting or time restricted eating is, how to use it safely, its benefits, especially for weight management, who should try it, and yeah, let's get into it. So first and foremost, what is intermittent fasting or time restricted eating? Now, as I go along, I'm going to cycle through the short form of intermittent fasting, which is IF, like a short form, an abbreviation. So if you hear if, where it's not supposed to be, just now I mean intermittent fasting. So yeah, so like I said in the intro, this is when you voluntarily cycle through eating and fasting, focusing on the time you eat rather than what you eat. The concept of fasting has been around for thousands of years as religious practices, believe it or not, political practices. And I actually happened to record this during the Lent and Ramadan periods. Big up to you guys who are fasting. However, recently, by recently I mean the 1900s, last century, scientists started to investigate the practice seriously and started discovering different benefits for this practice. I guess Jesus and Muhammad were on to something after all. So in the early 1900s, intermittent fasting, or IF was discovered to be useful for people with epilepsy. In the same century, scientists discovered that restricting calorie intake in rats extended their lifespan. So studies have continued to come in since then, and today we have more insights into the benefits of IF. These include improved blood pressure, weight management, autophagy. Autophagy is when the dead or damaged cells in your body and brain, especially brain, they are cleared out of the body for better functioning of the body, especially the brain. So that's what autophagy is. Intermittent fasting lowers bad cholesterol in the body, and very many others, as we shall see in the coming section. So how does intermittent fasting work? The mechanism. Intermittent fasting triggers a metabolic switch. This is the term coined by Dr. Mark Matson from the John Hopkins Medical Institute, I think so, yeah, in the body. So what's a metabolic switch? A metabolic switch is when the body switches from using glucose for fuel to glycogen, then later to fat for fuel, as we're going to see. So when we eat, all of us eat, I'm assuming, when we eat, glucose is released into the bloodstream. The body uses glucose as fuel, and the excess is stored as glycogen in the liver, as fat in the fat cells. If you don't eat in the next few hours, the blood glucose drops, the body turns to stored glycogen or the stored glucose in the liver for fuel, like to keep the body moving. So if you spend more time without eating, the body is forced to burn stored fat for fuel. However, this is burning fat is the last resort. The problem with today is that we are constantly eating because of the abundance of food, and it's made very palatable. So we easily consume it. It's so sweet. So we are constantly eating, thus we are always running on glucose. And since we are always having glucose in our blood, we are constantly storing more in the liver and in the fat cells. This leads to problems like the fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, which leads to type 2 diabetes and obesity, among other problems. So you might start to see, if you're wise, you're starting to see a link between intermittent fasting and losing body fat, but not so fast. Yeah. Now I would like to talk about something else that I learned about intermittent fasting that is so cool. Like, I find this fascinating. It might be a bit technical. I may not get everything right, but stick with me for a moment here. Here we go. So it turns out that our body cells follow a kind of clock or a rhythm. This is called the circadian rhythm. Circadian is a Latin word that comes from two words, circa, which means around, like C-I-R-C-A. You can see that it's like a circle, so it means around, and day means a day. So circadian represents or means around a day. This rhythm dictates a lot of major processes like insulin sensitivity, sleep, body temperature, wakefulness, among others, based on what time of day or night, like what time of the day, I would say, because night is also part of day. So I find this so cool. It means that right now your body is releasing or blocking hormones like cortisol, the stress hormone, melatonin, the sleep hormone in your body, based on what time it is right now. For example, in the morning, to fully wake up and be alert, your cortisol levels and blood, the cortisol levels, that's the stress hormone. People think stress is bad, but sometimes like stress is good under certain conditions. So the cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone, and the body temperature have to go up. That is why if you do a cold shower and exercise, these are great tools to start your day, because they raise your cortisol levels and your core body temperature, meaning you're more alert. And at night, you want the opposite, to fall asleep. You want your cortisol levels, the stress hormone, to go down, and also your body temperature to also go down, to easily fall asleep. So yeah, let's go on another technical journey. Now, how do these cells determine whether it's day or night? It turns out there is a master clock in your brain, and it is found in the suprachiasmatic nucleus cells. Yeah, let that sink in. Suprachiasmatic nucleus cells, or SCN, like that's a short form, SCN, in the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is part of your brain. So these cells, the SCN, they use light that comes through your eyes to determine if it's day or night. And in turn, the circadian rhythm is also determined in the other body cells. That's why it's a great thing to look at morning sunlight in the first 2 to 3 hours of waking, to like set your clock or the circadian rhythm of the body. We shall find out more about this in the coming episode about sleep. Yeah, so follow for this episode. It's coming out soon. So, but for now, let's look at today's topic. And today's topic is about what? It's about intermittent fasting. From what we know now about the circadian rhythm, it turns out that intermittent fasting, especially the 16 to 18 hour feeding window. I'm going to explain what 16 to 18, 14 to 10, 12 to 12 hour feeding windows mean in the next section. So it turns out that this is compatible with our long evolved biology of the circadian rhythm. Therefore, the best time to eat might be during the day, since insulin sensitivity in the body is better during the daytime and it's worse at night. Therefore, the common saying that eating heavy meals right before bed is bad, I think that's to make sense now. Now, I hope that wasn't too technical. I hope people didn't get bored on the way and they clicked off this. But for those that are still around, let's go to the methods of intermittent fasting. So how do people use intermittent fasting? So there are three methods that I found that they have been used in these scientific studies: the 16 to 8 hour feeding window, or the 14 to 10 method, the one I mentioned about, like up there. This is when you fast for 16 or 14 hours and eat for 8 or 10 hours of the day. However, some people go as far as 18 to 6 hours, meaning you're fasting for 18 hours, you're not eating anything or drinking any calories for 18 hours, and you're eating only for like 6 hours. Though that 18 to 6 feeding window can be hard on the body, and it may be hard for your body to get the required nutrients. It may force the body to go into starvation mode, which makes it harder for you to eventually lose fat. So 16 to 8 feeding window might look something like this. During the day, you eat from like 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Those are 8 hours. From 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. those are 8 hours. You don't eat or drink any calories beyond 6 p.m. However, water, black coffee, and tea without sugar, those are allowed because they don't have any calories. They're not going to trigger any insulin response in the body, so they are allowed. Though it's generally wise to avoid caffeine, this is the substance found in coffee, 6 hours to 12 hours before bedtime, as it can disrupt your sleep. So water, if you're about to sleep, water, tea without sugar, those are okay. Coffee, morning hours. Yeah, so let's move on to the next method. The next method is 5 to 2 method. This is where you eat without time restriction for 5 days in the week and for 2 non-consecutive days. I have to repeat that point. They are supposed to be non-consecutive days. So you might pick something like Tuesday and Thursday in the week, as long as they are not back to back. Yeah, so for those 2 days, you don't eat anything, or you eat approximately 500 calories. And for context, one apple contains like 95 calories. So on the fasting day, on these 2 fasting days, you eat like 5 to 7 apples only. A teaspoon of olive oil contains 119 calories approximately. So if you go the olive oil route, you can have like only 4 teaspoons of olive oil that day, and eating that day will be done those 2 days. The next method of intermittent fasting is alternating day fasting. Like you eat normally today, tomorrow you fast. Eat normally today, tomorrow you fast, or you consume around 500 calories. However, this is not sustainable for a very long period of time, as you can imagine. So you may do it for like, I don't know, a month, but in the long run, it may be harsh on the body. It may cause the body to go into starvation mode, which will make the body store more fat, thinking that there is a food shortage, meaning it has to protect you. Therefore, it will store more fat than it's losing the fat. So yeah, this one, you have to be careful with this one. So those are the 3 methods that have strong scientific research data. However, there are people out there that are doing 48, 72-hour fasts. Water, like that, only taking water. Other people fast what they like most. How are my Christian friends out there? Anyway, now it's time to move on to the benefits of intermittent fasting or time restricted eating. Now, this is so fascinating because as I was scripting this episode, an email came in from Dr. Rhonda Patrick. She has a PhD in medical science. She has a podcast called Found My Fitness. It's one word. She has a newsletter and a website with the same name. She breaks down scientific studies related to longevity. Her work, I really love her work. It's a wonderful resource for anyone interested in this topic like I am. So in this email, she was breaking down the new meta-analysis on intermittent fasting that came out in February 2026. Funny enough, like, this couldn't be any better. So in this meta-analysis, by the way, a meta-analysis is where scientists get lots of studies that tackle the same topic, and they analyze them like systematically. They analyze hundreds, thousands of these studies to get a coherent result. So that's what a meta-analysis is. So in this new meta-analysis, it concluded that intermittent fasting is no more effective. When we compare intermittent fasting to standard dietary advice for weight loss, there's no major difference between intermittent fasting and standard dietary advice. What is the standard dietary advice is that eat healthy, cut out junk food, source food from whole foods, eat as much natural food as possible. So that's the standard dietary advice. When calories are matched, so intermittent fasting and standard dietary advice for weight loss, basically there's no difference when calories are matched. But this makes sense from the physics point of view. To lose weight, you have to take in fewer calories than you burn. That's obvious. You have to be in a caloric deficit to lose weight. However, Dr. Rhonda Patrick pointed out something very wonderfully in her email. And she said that intermittent fasting makes a caloric deficit easier compared to counting calories. For example, if I start eating at 10 a.m., I have breakfast, lunch, supper before 6. I'm less likely to overeat within that time window rather than tracking my calories on a healthy diet but with no time limit. Yeah, so that's what she meant. As someone who has counted calories for like a month and a half, I can testify it's deadly, it's tough, it's really hard. So I would rather not count my calories, but I have a short feeding window than count my calories and I have an unlimited feeding window. So yeah, intermittent fasting will help you lose weight by helping you eat fewer calories. So yeah, if you're asking yourself, does intermittent fasting work for weight loss? Yes. But other diets all work as long as you're in a caloric deficit. So what are the other benefits of intermittent fasting or time restricted feeding? Intermittent fasting is good for our circadian biology, like I illustrated up there. Sleep, it's good for sleep. Having a lot of food in your gut is not good for sleep, so that's how it makes your sleep better. Autophagy, like I explained, this is the clearing away of damaged cells from your body, but especially in the brain. This leads to improved cognition and working memory in adults. Intermittent fasting has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity, which is great for people with type 2 diabetes, type 2 diabetes and people who are obese. Intermittent fasting used in people with chronic conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, epilepsy, like I said up there, and a few others. Now, I would like to give you tips on how to incorporate intermittent fasting within your life or how to do it. So, tip number 1 is easy to eat. By this I mean, if your goal is to do a 16/8 feeding hour window, or even an 18 to 6 hour feeding window, you can start by 12 to 12 eating window, like eat for 12 hours and fast for 12 hours, then gradually reduce that eating window. This will prevent the body from going into starvation mode, which will make it harder for you to lose fat. Tip number 2 is keep the eating window fairly regular. Now, this may sound like a contradiction from the first tip, but if your feeding window is like 10 to 6, try to keep it that way. And I keep using 10 to 6 because I'm trying it myself and I'm using the 10 to 6. But you can design whatever feeding window you want, even if you start from like 9 to 5 or 11 to 7 p.m. Yeah, so you can design whatever you like, but try to keep it regular, even over the weekends. There's a way people tend to throw away their diets on the weekends, but yeah, keep it regular even on the weekends. Tip number 3 is limit artificial sweeteners. Some of them can break your fast. Like, artificial sweeteners are the things you can use to sweeten your beverages, but they don't have any calories. Some of them, if you overdo it, they can break your fast. So tip number 4 is, this is not a tip, but anyway, water. I already said this, but water, black coffee, teas without sugar, these are all allowed. You can have them when you're fasting. Yeah, we are not doing a religious fast, because I understand in some religions they are not allowed. So don't take this, I'm not a religious leader or anything, but when it comes to intermittent fasting, water, black coffee, teas without sugar, these are all allowed. Just limit your coffee in the morning hours only. So yeah, those are my 4 tips on how to incorporate intermittent fasting within your lifestyle. And I would like to look at the people who shouldn't experiment with intermittent fasting. Children and teens below 18, no, they're not allowed. So this is obvious. Pregnant women, obviously, don't experiment with intermittent fasting. People with eating disorders, it's not advisable. People with type 1 diabetes, you need your insulin shots. Don't try out intermittent fasting. People on certain medications, I don't know which medications that do not align with intermittent fasting, but check with a healthcare professional or with your doctor and make sure it is okay for you. So, as I conclude, I would like to say that I just hope that this content gets you interested in these topics of health, fitness, performance enough to educate yourself. I cannot give you everything in a 30 minutes podcast or even a 20-minute podcast, but I hope it makes it interesting enough. I'm trying on that to get you into the game of health and fitness. Educate yourself more. Our environment today has changed a lot, but our biology has not changed. Therefore, we need to start taking our health and fitness more seriously. And with that, thank you for listening. Consider sharing, subscribing, following, whatever if you're called to. See you in the next one. Peace.